Welcome to the House of Truth. The, the day we're continuing our discussion with the patriarchs, and we're looking at the transition from Abraham to Isaac, and we're in particular we're looking at the bride of Isaac. Last time, if you remember, we talked about we talked about the binding of Isaac and how everything that happened to Abraham since he'd been called in the current in Ur of the Chaldeans was all geared to lead up to this seminal moment. And 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 well, like and so right now we have a little summary because we're about to. This lesson will be ending Abraham, and the focus will all be on Isaac after this transition. So we're gonna have a little summary of the life of what we've learned from the life of Sarah and Abraham. And I'm not going to go over the prophetic things and the different ethnic groups and things like which, while important, today they're not what we're going to discuss, and they don't tie in today's discussion very well, anyways. What we are going to talk about is some practical things that we've learned from these that can apply to everyday life. That can apply to everyday life, and they're in the continuation and we can see those things continue as we talk about the bride of Isaac. So, starting with Sarah. Sarah, though she was a follower of God, the mother of faith, had a rebellious heart to some degree. She cared more about what other women thought about her than about what Abraham thought or God thought. That's why she wasn't wearing the veil. She didn't want other women commenting about, making comments like, "Oh, she's just Abraham's doormat," or whatever the case may have been. But when she repented of that from the heart and became submissive to Abraham, first in private, calling him Lord, and then in public, putting that veil on, showing her, no longer going around acting like she was her own independent cosmopolitan woman. That's when God gave her the desire of her heart. And this had to happen. Now, God's plan had been from the beginning for her to have this supernatural birth, but the fact is she could have had it 10 years earlier, maybe even, and still worked inside that plan. She, at some point she was past the age of bearing and all these things way before she turned 90 or 89. That's when she conceived. I guess it was 89 when she conceived. Way before then. But what held her back was that rebellious heart, that not being submissive to the authority God placed in her life. And because a rebellious heart can never experience the blessing that comes upon a submissive heart or a humble heart, if you prefer to use that word. And that's what they kind of mean the same thing when you're talking about in the Bible. And likewise, a submissive heart will never experience the curses that come upon a rebellious heart. So if you want to move from a life that seems like it's full of curses to one that's full of blessings, it's about the heart. And that's what happened with Sarah. But Sarah wasn't the only one who needed to make some changes. Abraham was wimpy and weak at times. His faith was not always strong. He grew to the point where his faith was strong and he staggered not in unbelief. But it certainly wasn't the case whenever he told the king of the Pharaoh of Egypt, "She's my sister," because he's worried about him dying and Pharaoh killing him to get his wife. God already promised us someone's going to come from his own body, but he didn't cling to the promise of God. And at that time, he kind of tried to come with his own scheme, and he didn't learn. And part of the problem was he left his calling. He was called to the land of Canaan, and now things got tough, got there, and he decided to go outside his calling, try to fix his problem himself instead of submitting to the known will of God. And then later he does it again, but he just barely goes outside his calling with Abimelech. And again, now this time God's promise not just it'll come from his body, but it'll come through his wife. And he still has that same fear. He's had that fear since the day entered the promised land, we learned. And that fear has to be dealt with. He can only experience the promise of God by staggering not in unbelief, and he's still staggering in it. He's unstable. He's double-minded. He's unstable. And how does God get this? How does God get him to go? And for Sarah, for that matter, too, how do they transition from a somewhat rebellious heart, an unbelieving heart, to one of total faith and confidence, of one that was submissive to those that God put them in authority? God had to crush them somewhat. People gloss over and don't understand. And this thing, I mean, at least the army, the general Philco, or not Philco, anyway, the general focus there, guy. The general of Abimelech was there, and perhaps his army. And the whole veil thing was a cutting rebuke to both of them. It was public humiliation. But humility is what brings you to the place of blessing. And humiliation is the process of bringing you to humility. So, so then Abraham also experienced the blessing that God had planned for him. And again, they could have had it years earlier. Had planned for him. And also we saw that now he has a whole different attitude. He never again is going to leave his call, the area of his calling again, as I said. And when God told him to sacrifice Isaac, his response was immediate. First he said, "Here am I." Well, he won't need Lord. And when the Lord told him, he went and did it immediately. And because he was the friend of God, and that's not a shallow thing like people think of today. Oh, as long as we're doing something we both enjoy together, we're friends. And when one of us can't for some reason, say playing sports game, and one gets an injury or something, or family crisis, whatever. Oh, we're no longer friends because they were just there as my sports buddy. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about a serious life and death covenant, literally life and death. That was what one party would do for what one party, if one party asked the other party to do something, if one friend asked the other one to do something, and that friend did it, then if they asked, that the first friend had to do it as well. And often, it meant literally being willing to lay down your life for each other. That's the kind of relationship Abraham had with God, and it had to be tested, proven. Not so God would know, but proven. Abraham had to be given this test so he could pass it and prove it. And what they did was, now that God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only begotten son, his son of promise, his only son of promise, the son of promise. Now Abraham could ask God to sacrifice his son, and Abraham needed Messiah's blood to be cleansed of his sin, just like everyone else. So these are some of the things that we took away from this, and we're going to see some of these things play out here as we continue, as we look at the rest of the life of Abraham, and and Isaac is in the beginning of Isaac as well. The transition here with the bride of Isaac, and we're first going to begin with Genesis 22, verses 20 through 24. And it came to pass after these things, it was told Abraham, saying, "Behold, Milcah, she has borne also children unto your brother Nahor. And Uz is firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Camille, the father of Aram, and Kadesh, and Hazo, and Pildash, and and Jiplop, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These eight did Milcah bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his wife, his concubine, his name was Ruma. She bare also Teba and Gaham and Thrahash and Maacah. Okay, so there's several things here, but first, after what? The binding of Isaac. And as we discussed, Isaac was no more than 19 years old. And somewhere in that teen range, we don't know exactly. But let's say he was 19, okay? Isaac's getting close to marrying age. And he gets news from afar. Remember, he's on this golden crescent. On one end, if you're going to Babylon to Egypt, you go up to Haran, halfway, and you come as far north as you go. Then you go down through Canaan into Egypt for trade, and that's pretty much the only way he had to get news about this. In some years he may not get any news for years. Well, notice he hadn't gotten news for a long time. He's just now learning his brother had eight kids by one woman and 4 by another. And there's almost a side note here about Rebecca, but she's the main one. And Bethuel, by the way, Rebecca's father's house means his name means house joined to God. Okay, so it gives us an insight that these are God worshipers. Okay, that they're still clinging to the God, the same God, the same as the God of Abraham. They're still clinging to him. They've not, many people have abandoned and went into idolatry, as I mentioned before, and there's even evidence that Abraham's own father did, but this guy at least is clinging to them, is clinging to God. And Huz is also pronounced, is also Uz, just without the H. And that's like Job, the book of Job, in the land of Huz, okay? In the land of Uz. So it gives you an idea. And I'm not going to go with all these people today. I could have done that in these other descendants of Abraham we'll look at and made a whole lesson on that. But we're going to focus on this bride business. So now Abraham has gotten news. His brother, he left. He hadn't seen him by this point, literally, I hadn't seen him in over 50 years, maybe 70, 75, perhaps. It's been a long time. And now he knows something. He's gotten some useful information. His brothers had children. And by the name of this name, Bethuel, house joined to God, at least one of them is a God worshiper. A worshiper of Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh. No one knows how to pronounce it, but however you like. Okay, Yahuwah, Yahweh. So, however you like, since no one knows the name, but he knows he's a worshiper of the same God that Abraham worshipped, the God that Noah worshipped. Now we're going to continue on here in Genesis 23. We're going to continue on here in Genesis 23 in verses 1 through 6. And Sarah was 20 years old. These are the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abram came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abram stood up before his dad and spoke unto the sons of Het, saying, I'm a stranger sojourner with me. Give you a possession of burying place with you. I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Het answered, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. The choice of our sepulchre bury your dead. None of us shall withhold from you his sepulchre, that you may bury your dead. Okay, so there's a lot here. First of all, notice Sarah. She's the only woman in the Bible whose age when she dies is given. Okay, so Sarah's 127. And the significance of that is that Isaac is now 37 years old. Remember, she was born when she was 90 when Isaac was born. Now he's 37. And that's the life of Sarah. And she died. Now she died in Hebron. And remember, it's got more than one name. But because there's different people who are going to occupy this, they got different words for it from different languages. Okay, so the Canaanites, are calling it Kirjath Arba. It's really two words that are compounded together. Arba being a place, Kirjath there's perhaps being more than one. Arba they distinguish which one. Like Bethlehem Ephrata, kind of like the same ideal. So that's worth noting here. And notice who's talking to. Now it's the Hittites. If you remember, before he was with Mamre the Amorite, and then he went down. After he went to Egypt, he came back. Then he was with the Philistines, but staying inside the Promised Land, except for when he went just barely over the border into the capital of Gerar. And now. But now he's dealing with he's with another group, the Hittites. He's there. And notice this relationship with them. You're a prince among us. He has a good relationship with him. And Het means terror. The sons of terror. That's the Hebrew expression for terrorist. So think Hamas, okay, perhaps today, or one of these type groups. Now they're not, but not every one of them, notice they're not Jew hating, Abraham hating people here at all. Okay. And notice their respect for him. And notice they're going to give these sepulchres that they're talking about is kind of like these raised tombs, like in New Orleans out of necessity, where they have to bury people above ground because of the low water. And they're a bunch of monuments and different things. And, and of course, rich and powerful ones have really big, elaborate ones. And they're offering to let Abraham bury Sarah in any one of those they want. They'd be thrilled to have her body in there, in the finest one that's available. But now we're going to look at Abraham's response to this. And we begin in Genesis 23, verse 7 through 11. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of land, even to the children of Heth. And they communed with them, saying, if it be in your mind that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat me to me, Ephron, the son of Zohar. They may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is in the end of his field, for as much money as is worth, he shall give it to me for possession for a burying place among you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even all that went to the gate of his city, saying, Nay, Lord, hear me. The field I give you, and the cave therein I give it you. In the presence of the sons of my people, I give it to you. I give it you. Bury your dead. So Abraham has picked out a place he wants. Now, why did he take, the question may pop up, why did he just, let him put him in one of those places? I mean, he's not trying to insult them. Notice how he bows down to the people. He bowed himself. He's showing them respect. Okay. There's no animosity between Jew and Gentile to speak of here, because Abraham's circumcised and they're not. Okay. He is showing them respect as well. But why? But the problem with those tombs I mentioned is they have carvings on them of images of other gods. And Abraham doesn't want that. So he don't want to risk that. So he wants them in a separate burial, a separate graveyard for his people, a separate place. He doesn't want Sarah associated with the idols of the Canaanites. And so he wants to buy this cave of Machpelah. And Machpelah means double chambered. And and this why that? Because it had two chambers. The men were put in one, and the women were put in another. And from the entrance, you had to go through the women's to get to the men's. And this is a picture of the tabernacle in the temple that will come later. There's a holy place you have to go through to get the high priest to go through to get to the Holy of Holies. In the same way, there's a court of the Gentiles you had to go to get into the, if you were circumcised, to go into the court of the Israelites. And even that was divided between men and women. The court of the women was first. You had to go through that to get to the court of the men, and that they would meet the priest of the sacrifice kind of halfway and hand it off to the men, to the priest. And if they were super busy, they might actually help them kill the animal, there. But if they were overwhelmed, lessen the work on the priest. Okay, so this cave is a picture of that. But the important thing is this double chambers, one for women, one for men. Marriage is for life. After that, man and wife are no longer joined together; they're separated. That's why this double chambers. In Hebrew today and translated in English, this cave is called the cave of the mamas and papas, or the matriarchs and patriarchs. And of course, notice the order again, because you go through the matriarchs first, then you go to the patriarchs. That same pattern we see in the temple later. So he wants this cave, and he wants to buy it. But notice, now Ephron is a Hittite. Notice he's living among these. He's a Hittite. Okay, he's also a Hittite. So he's living among the Hittite, and children of Heth means the same thing. Okay, Hethi, belonging to Heth. Children of Heth, of course, belong to him. And he's like, no. Notice, my Lord, that respect to Abraham. It's maybe a little deeper than just saying, sir, okay? My Lord. He wants to give it to Abraham. He respects Abraham so much, he just wants to give him the whole thing for nothing, for free. Now we're going to look at Abraham's response to that. We continue in Genesis 23 in verses 12 through 16. And Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land. And he spoke to Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, if you will give it, I pray you hear me. I'll give you money for the field. Take it of me, and I'll bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, my Lord, hearken to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. Why is that betwixt me and you, between me and thee? Bury therefore your dead. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. Okay, there's some outstanding things here I want you to know. First of all, current money. This is the first time money's mentioned. But notice they still weigh it. And what it was is like, they cut them like perhaps like little squares or little bars, and they cut them in 1 shekel weight pieces. But some people were dishonest, so you weigh it to show that you haven't shaved any of those. Your 400 shekel pieces each weigh 1 shekel each. Okay, you haven't shaved off some of it off each one to lower its value. And a shekel of silver was generally considered like a day's wages for a day labor. In the U.S. for their effective, depends on where you live, but your effective, where I live, the effective minimum wage, it's roughly $100. It's roughly $100 per shekel. So he's giving them $40,000. And he insisted on buying it. I mean, notice he could have it for free. And why? Because he wants, first of all, Ephron probably has family. He's not trying to take the inheritance from Ephron's children. Okay. Even though it's his field, it's not that, whatever. He wants to make sure, but also, they will now inherit the money and not try to come back later and say, hey, our dad gave away our inheritance, and, basically cause him legal problems, as it were. All right. So he's wanting to make sure everything's done the right way, and there's no dispute that he's the owner of this piece of land. He's not owned anything other than that well, which he dug. That's all he's owned all his years. He didn't even own anywhere to bury his own dead. And he wants, there be no doubt about it. Unfortunately, there will be doubt about it, not by these people, but much later, people will try to claim it and whatever, because they're trying to claim the entire promised land, and it's just like Israel today. The Ottoman Turks had control of it. The people who lived there were peasant farmers, kind of like sharecroppers, called fellahs. The Turks hired out to work the land. And when the Ottoman Turks lost World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, they gave Britain the southern part of what they called Syria, which includes Israel and Jordan today. And the Brits in the Balfour Declarations gave it to the Jewish people. But they still owed a lot of money in the war reparations in the Treaty of Versailles. And the Rothschilds gave the land to owners who lived in Turkey $1 billion. I mean, in today's money, it's like $250 billion, $200 billion, somewhere in that range. We're talking about a lot of money, okay? And the Turks gladly sold it, because they already had to give it to Britain anyways. But that they're selling the release of their claim. Then when Jewish immigrants started moving in, they paid the fellas who were just tenant farmers who never owned a land for it as well, trying to follow this example here of Abraham to erase all doubt about who the owner was. Again, the people who were on the land actually working it were like sharecroppers, and they never owned a land to begin with. So Abraham's trying to head that kind of scenario off that we see today by doing this. Where people won't be claiming later, oh no, that's ours, and blah, 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 which literally has happened with this particular piece of land we got right now. They claim that Muslims have gained control of it in Israel, and they claim that Ishmael's in there, not Isaac, and so on and so forth. Okay. But Abraham was trying to head that off with this. That's why he's paying for something he could have got for free, a significant amount of money. Now we continue on in Genesis 23, verses 17 through 20. The field, which is in Machpelah, which is before Mamre, the field and the cave that they're in, and the trees that were in the field that were all on the border about made sure. Unto Abraham in possession the children of Heth for all that went to the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. In the cave, in the field and the cave therein is made sure to Abraham possession of burying place for the sons of Heth. Okay, notice before Mamre, right near Mamre. And remember, Mamre the Hittite, the area became named after. Remember when Abraham rescued Lot, he also rescued they had attacked the Hittites first, and some of these guys who were allied tried to cut off the aid to the kings when they came down against the kings of Sodom, and some of them fled into what's Canaan, and Mamre was one of them. And we saw that Abraham had good relations with him as well. Notice Abraham is a man of peace. He's had good relationship with everyone. Only time he ever went to war was to rescue Lot. Okay, so now, so this Machpelah is near there, and this Hebron is the same as Kirjath Arba. Sorry about that, but it's got another name too, and it's important to know this. It's important to know this because when you see it later, you may need to associate. It's like how Shaul, the apostle Paul, is also Saul and Paul are the same guy, but have two different names. And if you didn't recognize that, you might get confused. Or Daniel and Belteshazzar in the book of Daniel, same guy, two different names. Well, it's important of these places too, because there's connections it connects events when you recognize they're the same place. And another one of these names is brought out here in Acts 17, verse 7, in the speech of Stephen, the offense of Stephen, verse 16. And we're carried into Shechem, in the land, laid in a sepulcher. Abram had bought for some money the sons of Emor, the father of Sychem. Okay, so notice the sons of Emor are calling it after Sychem. All right, one of these guys probably took possession of it later and renamed it. It was very common. And, it's happened today. There's lots of places. Bombay got renamed, in recent times, to a much, it was a terrible idea. I mean, honestly, it was one of the most recognizable names in the world. It was it was very, people instantly had an image in their mind, but they renamed it and no one thinks of anything when they hear the new name, so, but nonetheless, that's what happens in history. So they're wanting you to know, because as the events at the same place often have a connection to each other in the Word of God. So that's why this is important. This. Now we continue on. Now we're going to go to the next chapter. In Genesis 24, verse 1 through 4, we're going to see what happens after Sarah's died. Where she died in 127, when Abraham's 137 and Isaac's 37. And Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord blessed Abraham in all things. And he said to his eldest servants in his house that ruled over all he had, "Put, I pray you, your hand under my thigh. And I'll make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven, the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife unto my sons and the daughters of Canaanites whom I dwell, but you shall go to my country, to my kindred, and take a wife to my son Isaac." Okay, now he's old, and we'll get to this exact age. We'll get a pretty good idea of his exact age when we get towards the end here. But he's over 130. He's over 137. Just keep that in mind here, okay? Now he's making his servant do this strange thing. He's putting his hand under his thigh. Now, why is he making his eldest servant of his house? Remember, that was Eliezer of Damascus, who had been set up originally to inherit all of Abraham's wealth. But Isaac came along, okay? And he's having this same guy swear to his hand under his thigh. Why under his thigh? Because the thigh is often associated with the genitals in the Bible, the reproductive organs. And Isaac is the one who the seed is supposed to come through. But Isaac's 37 years old plus here. He's at least 37 years old to be seen. And he didn't have a wife. And remember, when we looked at the genealogy that led from Noah to Abraham, some of those guys had their first son by the time they were 30, got married younger than that. Okay. And, Isaac has not been interested in getting a wife. He's only had room for one woman in his life, and that was his mama. And Abraham, those guys, the seed of promise, Messiah that's going to come through his son, the seed of promise, Isaac, can't come about with Isaac never getting married. It takes two to create children, okay? A man and a woman. So Abraham makes him promise this thing. And notice, do not take one sons of the daughters of Canaanites who I dwell. Okay, so he had a problem. Why did he want him to marry those? Because they don't worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not a racial thing. In fact, and this is important. In rabbinic Judaism, if a person has mixed parents, one Jew, one Gentile, rabbinic Judaism teaches it's the mother that matters. You're considered Jewish in rabbinic Judaism if your mother was Jewish, even if your father's a Gentile. Now, in the Bible, it's actually the opposite way around. If your father's Jewish, it's upon him to circumcise you, except, and you're counted as a descendant. Well, that's how the lineage is counted, the male line. If you're like a case like Timothy, where you have a Gentile father and a Jewish mother, then you have a choice. And Timothy chose to go to get circumcised, as a grown man, as a young grown man, and go that route. But in rabbinic tradition, the rabbis teach it's the mother that matters, and here's why. The mother's the one that imparts culture. Now, she imparts religion. Now it may be a case like Ruth, where Ruth came in and married into a Jewish family and had to learn Jewish traditions, and then she passed them on later. And so her husband actually was the worshiper of God originally, perhaps the father of Abraham. But she had come in, and we know if you read the book of Ruth, we know from the text that she wasn't going back to the gods of the land. She'd been a worshiper of idols. But when Boaz has children with her, Ruth is gonna have them during their formative years. So even though she's the convert, she is the one who's going to pass it on to the children during their formative years. Generally speaking, there was a trade-off around 12 years old, around the time of puberty, where most of the women and boys and girls both alike learned how to do necessary things for life, how to cook food and clean and whatever. And and the mother was often the one who taught them to read when they were literate, except the man's out working, and when they get about 12, there's a trade-off. And the woman and the boys and the girls, to some extent, are going to go off with the father and learn to do what he's doing. And why the girls? Why this Jewish thing about girls that goes back to, way back when? Why that? Because you don't know where life will take you, and they didn't want their daughters getting married to some guy and maybe having some kids, and the man dying and having no means to support herself. It's just wisdom. So she's going to learn and we've seen you'll see examples in the Bible of shepherdess girls being shepherds, etc. Okay, so it wasn't just that, but by the time of 12, a lot of this stuff is already set. I mean, Martin Luther said, "Give me your children till they're 5 years old, and I'll have them for life." That's why the emphasis on the mothers, and that's why he can't have a daughter of the Canaanites. It's not he's racist against them. He went. Before his wife insisted, he went with Hagar, the Egyptian. Okay, but for Isaac, it's got to make sure it's a God-fearer. And now there are none around him they knows of, except maybe outside his own camp. And that could be problematic too for a number of reasons. So, but he's heard Bethuel, house joined to God. His brother, there's some hope that back there's some. So now he's going to send this servant to get a wife for Isaac from them. With the hope he'll find a God-fearer among them. We continue on in Genesis 24, verse 5 through 9. And the servant said unto him, "Peradventure this woman be not willing to follow me unto the land. Must I needs bring your son again to the land from whence you came?" And Abraham said, "Be aware that you bring not my son there again. The Lord God, which took me from my father's house in the land of my kindred, which spoke to me, and swear unto me, saying, unto your seed I'll give this land. He shall send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife of my son from there. And if the woman be not willing to follow you, then you shall be clear from this my oath only bring not my son there again. And the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swear to him concerning that matter. Okay, so this guy has a legitimate question here. What if the woman's not willing to come? It could happen. Well, don't, do I just take, do I have to then go with Isaac, let him pick someone out, take him back? And the answer is no. Because remember, Abraham has learned his lesson not to leave his calling. Remember, there's that greater promised land, but only concerning Isaac's the land of Canaan, only. And we showed this in the restoration of Israel, how not all the land between the Euphrates and in the brook of Egypt, that branch of the Nile that's closest to Israel today, that's westernmost, is going to be given to the people of Israel, but is going to be given to the descendants of Abraham forever. Okay, various ones, and we talked about what happens with them. But the land of Canaan alone is where Isaac's called to be. That's where Abraham was originally called to. And that's the land he's going to inherit. And and Abraham's learned his lesson not to leave his calling. And he recognized this calling is not just his calling, but it's Isaac's too. So absolutely do not get my son. He's keeping his son from trouble here. Don't take him back there. Don't let him get him out of his calling and get him into trouble. And then, okay. So Abraham says, if she won't come, you're not in trouble here. Your oath has been sworn. And notice this man is swearing to the Lord God of heaven. Abraham mentions that, but earlier we saw that. That's who he told him to swear to. This man is a God-fearer, is a follower, is a believer. He fears the God of Abraham at this point. Later, we call the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Noah, he fears him. And that's super important, because if he didn't, there could be real trouble. We're going to look at that as we go. We'll see that as we go along. And now we continue on Genesis 24, verse 10 through 14. The servant took 10 camels of his master and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia unto the city of Nahor. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water at the time of the evening, even the time that the women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray you, send me good speed this day. I show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of men of the city come out to draw water. And to let it come to pass, the damsel whom I shall say, let down your pitcher, I pray you, that I may drink. And she shall say, drink, and I'll give your camels drink also. But the same be she that you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and hereby shall I know that you have shown kindness unto my master. Okay, now he's praying to them. Now notice where he's at. He's Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, what that literally means. It's about the area of Babylonia. And Nahor, I keep saying Nahor because it's a ket there. Should have been, translated to a CH would have been more accurate. But anyways, Nahor, has made his brother has formed his own city, as well. And that's where he told him to go to his father's house. He figures this is it. Okay. It's his brother. And Abraham knows there's at least, one of his sons, Bethuel, house joined to God, is a God-fearer. So there's a good chance. There's a chance they're finding a wife that worships God here, but he doesn't know anyone, and it's not like. And more importantly, he just doesn't know their heart. They could sell these goods, and they could just be signing up. They could be saying it because they want the goods. But we're seeing his heart. His heart. Notice he's out looking out for the good of his master Abraham and the servant Isaac. And remember, he once in line was to inherit all this stuff. And Isaac, is taking them out of contention. And if he wasn't a God-fearer, I mean, we know from Nehemiah about how long this journey takes. Okay, this journey is around 4 months. Basically there and back's gonna take about a year. Okay, close to a year. So probably left in the spring and came back late fall when he's gonna get back, and he had ample opportunity once across the Euphrates River. He's not in the land of Canaan. He's outside the greater promised land. For him to just go off somewhere else, say Elam, take all this wealth and live it up. But he doesn't, because he fears God, and he's got his eyes on the prize. His wealth is not on earth, it's in heaven. He believes God will reward him for his faithfulness. And so he's loyal to God, and he's loyal to Abraham as well. He's faithful. And this word damsel can mean, can mean virgin also. So he's looking for a virgin, someone that hadn't been married to someone else before. Someone, his qualification is all about her heart. Someone that has the right heart, that submissive heart we talked about earlier, that humble heart. Now let's see how God answers. God, Yahuwah, Yahweh, however you pronounce, however you like, answers him in Genesis, as we continue on Genesis 24, 15 through 20. And it came to pass before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher on her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin. Near didn't even known her, and she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, let me, I pray you, drink a little water of your pitcher. And she said, drink, my lord. And she hasted and let down her pitcher from her upon her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also, till they have done drinking. And she hasted and emptied her pitcher in the trough and ran again to draw water and drew it for all his camels. Okay, now this pitcher on her shoulder, it varies, but 10 gallons wasn't untypical. 5, perhaps 5. If you count the pitcher, be around 50 pounds. This depends on how strong the woman was, etc. But we're talking, it's and she's now adding work for herself. Notice she has to go to the well to draw the water and has to go over the trough to do the camels. And notice she's hasted. She's lively. She immediately, and you can see her compassion for other people. Mind you, she does not know who this guy is yet. All she knows is this man is tired and weary from his long journey. And his camels need watering. And she is acting totally in compassion for him. That's her heart. She's a virgin. The damsel, again, is a virgin. And we're going to notice the expression, a virgin here had no any man known her. Well, that's the definition of a virgin. Why say that twice? Because it speaks of her purity. In Hebrew, in English, we might say the most holy, the more holy. In Hebrew, you would say Kadesh, Kadesh. You'd repeat the word twice. And the motion goes 3 times. Kodesh, Kadosh, Kadesh. That's holy of holies, holiest, okay? Now, it's saying stating the obvious, repeating it, speaks a little bit more of her purity. She's beyond, her purity goes beyond just, hasn't, it's remained a virgin, hasn't had her hymen broken, okay? It speaks of her, it speaks of her her coming to that godly standard of purity of no contract, no contact. We're like the Apostle Paul wrote, it's good for a man not to touch a woman that's not his wife. And he meant that in the most literal sense. I mean, if I'd understood the Bible, because if I had a religious professional tell me, because I went and asked, and just told me what the Bible said, I wouldn't have so much as held my wife's hand till we got married. I remember to this day how I felt when I held her hand. It formed a connection. It made a change, and it was, totally unexpected on my behalf. So she certainly wouldn't kiss another man on her lips. The only person that she might hug would be like her brother, someone like that, okay? She has kept herself completely pure. And the fact she's very fair to look upon is just a bonus, okay? She's beautiful. The word Rebecca, Rivka in Hebrew, means captivating, okay? So she's very attractive woman, but that's a bonus. Notice that in the servant's prayer, he had nothing to say about her appearance. That's the least of his concerns. So she's got the right heart, and she's kept herself pure. And that is what he prayed for. And she's done the action. So things are looking good. She's looking like a good candidate. But he needs to know more about her family. Notice how it specifies again that she's from the wife of Nahor, not his concubine. There's a reason why we're told this twice now. Again, I'll get to the part explain, because it really comes down to understanding the difference between a wife and a concubine. Why this is so super important, okay? But he didn't pray that it had to be from the wife, but that's also another bonus feature about her, okay? So now we're going to continue on in Genesis 24, verse 21 through 27, because he still doesn't know. He hadn't asked her, he doesn't know if she's going to accept this offer and so on and so forth at all. And that's what we pick up. And the man, wondering, either held his peace, to wit, where the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. It came to pass that the camels had done drinking. The man took a golden earring of a half shekel of weight, and 2 bracelets for a hand of 10 shekels of gold of weight of gold. And he said, "Whose daughter are you? Tell me, I pray you, is there room in your father's house to lodge us in?" And she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare to Nahor." And she said, "Moreover to him, we have both straw and provender enough and room to lodge in." And the man bowed his head down and worshiped the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who has not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord has led me to the house of my master's brethren." Okay. He has now found out who she is. And again, notice again the stressing about this, about being the daughter of the wife, not the daughter of the concubine. And notice the house joined to God. Gives him a reason to believe he has found someone that worships God there among Abraham's kindred, from his father's house. And and she's shown that she has the right heart. So he's giving God. So again, we can see he's a God-fearer himself. He's worshiping the God of my master Abraham, the God of Abraham, which is the God of Noah, is what and so on. The God, we'd say, the day of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's worshiping him, and he's thanking him for making his journey prosperous thus far. Now he knows who she is, but she still doesn't know who he is. And that's part of it. Notice her hospitality. She is inviting a total stranger to come into her house and take care of him. Again, her compassion on a stranger. He asked if they could come over, but no, she didn't go ask her brother or mother, brother, anyone. She just says yes. Her compassion for this man, this stranger. Now we can see, but she does know something about him. She does know one thing about him. Those that half shekel weight of gold and the bracelets of 10 shekels weight. And 10, of course, has significance. She was about instruction like the 10 commandments, etc. Okay. So she knows he's rich, and she's excited about the bling, as people would say today. Now we're going to continue on Genesis 24, verse 28 through 33. And the damsel ran and told one of her mother's house these things. Told them of her mother's house these things. And Rebekah the bird, his name was Laban. And Laban ran out to the man under the well. And it came to pass, he saw the earring and the bracelet on his father's house, and when he heard the words of Rebekah's sister, saying, this man said thus to me. They came to the man, behold, he stood by the camels at the well. He said, come in, you blessed of the Lord. Wherefore do you stand without? I prepared the house and room for the camels. And the man came into the house, and he ungirded his camels, and gave straw, and provided the camel, wash his feet, and the men's feet that were with him. And there were set at meat before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I've told my errand. He said, speak on. Okay, so we got Laban, so we'll say Laban. Okay. And we'll see him later, we'll see him later in our study of the patriarchs. But for the day, this is what we need to know. Notice her mother's house. There's no mention of Nahor. He apparently has died. Mom is being taken care of by Laban. Okay, Bethuel, I should say, has died. There's no mention of Bethuel here, okay? She's the daughter of Bethuel, but there's no mention of him. And Bethuel is taking care of his mother. And this alone tells this man something important about them, that she has been raised to value family, okay? She's not going to abandon, her brother's not going to be abandoned if she leaves. Her brother's going to take care of him and has been taking care of him. And he's been fulfilling the duty of a son to do so. And it's the son's duties, not the sister, not the daughter's, because the daughter may need to get married and move off somewhere. Okay. But it says something to him about how she's been raised. And notice what Laban, her brother, does. Notice the guy didn't go out there, just follow her in. He wanted to make sure the man of the house, Laban, was on board with that. Okay. Respect for the man of the house. And now the man of the house came. He knew, as soon as he saw the earrings and the bracelets on his sister's hands, he understood what was going on. This was sort of dating ancient Middle East style. He knew this man was interested in more than just water for his camels from Rebekah. He just doesn't know the details. He doesn't know if this man wants to marry Rebekah himself or someone else, or is there on behalf of somebody else. And he knows there's obviously some wealth here. Now, notice again, he has that same hospitality, same hospitality, that same concern for people that he does not know, other than the fact that this guy rich and interested in has interest in his sister, okay, to come there. And notice it takes care. And notice that the men's feet. This Eliezer Damascus, who we read about way earlier, is not alone. There's these men, and these men also are God-fearers. They could have got out there and said, hey, we know he's faithful to Abraham, and we're going to take him out and take the stuff and run off, or something. You could have tried to done him in, and took all this wealth themselves. But they also they're not doing it because they're afraid of Abraham at this point. I mean, they're way off. for they're doing it because they're afraid of God. Okay. Everyone in the camp of Abraham, remember, had to be circumcised. They've all come into covenant with God, and it's reflecting in their character, and it's made them trustworthy. I mean, Abraham had to really trust these people when you think about it. But now the man is going to tell him why he's there. And now they learn who this mysterious stranger is and what his interest in Rebekah is. They said, I am Abraham's servant, and the Lord has blessed my master greatly. He has become great, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold, men servants and maid servants, camels and asses. Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him has given all that he has. And my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife to my son, the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. You shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and take a wife to my son. And I said to my master, peradventure the woman will not follow me. Okay, so he starts rehearsing the whole thing, but this is new information to them. He's telling Abraham, first of all, they may not Nahor appears to be dead. Bethuel definitely appears to be dead. There's no mention of him, other than being the mother, and Nahor is taking. I mean, his son Laban is taking care of his wife, so indicates he's probably dead. But Abraham's still alive. They perhaps assumed Abraham was dead as well. But in sense, no, he's alive. This servant's telling him, notice, I'm Abraham's servant. I'm not here for my own business. I'm here for my master's business. And he talks about, the wealth of his master. He's alive and well over in the land of the Canaanites. And he sent me to get a wife. And then he talks about this, and he starts talking about this problem he brought up to his master. And we continue on in Genesis 40, verse 44. We read the following. He said to me, the Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and prosper your way, and shall take a wife of my son, my kindred, my father's house. Then you shall be clear of my from this oath. If you come to my kindred, if they give you not one, then you shall be clear of your oath. And I came this day to the well, and said, O Lord God of Abraham, now do you prosper my way which I go. Behold, I stand by the well water, and I come to pass, when the virgin comes forth to draw water, I'll say to her, give me, I pray you, a little water of your pitcher to drink. And she shall say to me, drink both you, and I'll also draw up your camels. Let the same be the woman whom the Lord has appointed out for my master's son. Okay. So, he's rehearsed what he said to Abraham. And notice the angel's going to go, I'll send his angel with you. And that could be a reference to the Melech Adonai, which we've discussed before, the angel of the Lord, which is the Messiah. But regardless, he's been preparing the whole way to get him there quickly and back, and getting all the obstacles out of the way, as it were. So he's things have worked out well for him, both going and when he returns, be the same sort of thing. Now, he's telling about this oath and this problem. He wants to know. And he got there and he said, well, how do I know the right one? And he had this character test this woman passed. And again, notice it's a damsel earlier, but notice he specifies virgin here. So, it was only about her character. That's all his test was about. It wasn't about her looks or anything else. Notice there's no mention about her family and all that stuff. Other than the fact it's supposed to be from his father's house, but she could have been born from the concubine and still been part of the father's house. So, that was all bonus. He didn't specify that. And he continues on explaining this to them in Genesis 24, verse 45 through 49. And before I'd done speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came forth with her pitcher and showed, and she went down to the well and drew water. And I said to her, let me drink, I pray you. And she made haste and let down her pitcher from her shoulder and said, drink, I'll give your camels drink also. So I drank, and she made the camels drink also. And I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, who Milcah bare unto him. I put the earring upon his face and the bracelets upon her arms. And I bowed down my head and worshiped the Lord, blessed the Lord God of my master Abraham, which had led me in the right way to take my master's brother's daughter unto his son. Now, if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me that I may turn to the left hand, to the right hand, or to the left. Okay, so he rehearses, all these things, this test of her character again. And again, notice he gave her these gifts to show interest, okay? Kind of like perhaps like a promise ring today, you might think of, or not quite, there's been no engagement here, but maybe something like that, he's doing this to show it, his interest, but the interest is not for himself. Again, notice his faithfulness. It's for his master's son. He didn't say, wow, man, she's a great looking woman. I'm going to take her for me. No, he didn't do that. He fears God. Notice he worships the Lord and thanks God for this. And now he has this question, are you going to let her go with me or not? Because if not, he's got to go look among these other descendants in the city of Nahor for another woman. He believes God has chosen her. He says that very plainly. He says that very plainly, that she was that he had chose her for this reason, that God had prepared her ahead of time for Isaac. But he has to get the blessing of her family to do this. Now we're going to look at the response. We're going to look at the response of her family here as we continue on Genesis 24, verse 4 through 55. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing proceeds from the Lord. We cannot speak to you, good or bad. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken. And it came to pass when Abraham's servant heard these words, he worshipped the Lord, bowing himself to the ground, to the earth. And the servant brought forth jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and mother precious things. And they did eat, and he and the men that were with him, and tarried all night. And they rose up in the morning. He said, send me away to my master. And their brother and mother said, let the damsel abide with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she shall go. Okay, notice that again. All right, I'm corrected there. Bethuel finally answers. First mention of him, unless I missed anything, of him being there. So Bethuel's not dead yet, but Laban's definitely taking care of the mother. And notice they are worshipers of God. They recognize, they acknowledge this is from the Lord, and they're not going to get in the way. They're given the blessing. So now he's got the blessing of the family. And notice he doesn't just give these nice things to Rebekah. He gives gifts to notice her brother and their mother as well. Apparently dad gets nothing, but if you're dad, that's not uncommon. Okay. Yeah. CNFL guys, oh, mom, dad, nothing. So, I want to thank their mother, whatever. So the same thing is going on here. Nothing ever really changes. We want to get on the brother's good side and the mother's, okay? So they're giving them these precious things. But the point is, it's not just gifts to the bride, it's to her family as well. And there's a good reason for that, and we'll discuss that in a few minutes. We talk about the difference between a wife and a concubine. Because as you can see, it's been an important detail this whole time. Now, in the morning, he's like Abraham, right on it. God told him, Abraham, go take your son. The next morning, Abraham's right on it. This guy is right on it, wants to take care of this. But, Laban and his mother, notice no mention of the father, okay, again. They wanted to wait. They want to wait a few days, and it's kind of understandable when you think about it. It's 4 months travel away. They know Abraham's not coming back. She goes there, she's not coming back. And they'd have to go to them. And they're settled in a town, not traveling merchants. Probably they're never going to see her again. That's just reality. So they'd like to spend a few days with her first before they send her off. So they've accepted this. They're given. They said she can be. They've given the blessing for her to be the wife of Isaac, but they wanted to stay for a few more days first. But now we're gonna look and see what Rebecca has to say about this matter. As we continue on in Genesis 24, verses 56 through 61. He said unto them, hinder me not, seeing the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away, I may go to my master. They said, we'll call the damsel and inquire at her mouth. And they called Rebecca and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. And they sent away Rebecca, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant, and his men. And they blessed Rebecca and said to her, you are our sister. Be you the mother of thousands of millions, and let your seed possess the gate of those which hate them. And Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode into the camels and followed the man. And the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Okay. So, when they asked Rebekah, notice her response immediate. Yeah, she may have been waiting for someone to get married, but she's very attractive. She probably could have gotten married sooner, most likely, but she wanted a God-fearer. And what does she know about Isaac? Really, at this point, she knows this total stranger says that he's from Abraham, but God's given some proof that there's some legitimacy to that. That Isaac is Abraham's son, doesn't have a clue how old he is. Okay. And she's Isaac's second cousin, by the way. Her father, Bethuel, is Isaac's first cousin. Okay. She knows something a little about the family. She knows he's got wealth and he worships God. That's all she knows. And she knows it's the will of God. God has shown that. And that she's been prepared for this man. And she, just like Abraham, Hanani, here I am. Send me. And she gets right on it, just like Abraham did. Again, notice it's about her heart is where the focus is. And because she has this right heart, that submissive heart, submissive to God and submissive she's consenting to, as Sarah called Abraham Lord, to call another man Lord that she's never even met, but she knows it's the will of God. The blessing that's is going to come upon her. Now, thousands of millions, that's billions. I mean, that's billions. Okay. Why would it say that? Because just as Sarah we saw was called the mother of all of those of faith, just like Abraham's the father of all the faith. That lineage that goes to the seed of promise is going to come through her. And so it's not just about the physical descendants, her physical descendants. It's not about those who are like the stars of heaven, those heavenly, the spiritual descendants as well, the believers. And when you consider those, you do get billions, okay? You will. And then notice this other thing. And we don't know, perhaps the guy told him or not, but notice this thing about possessing the gate of those that hate them. And remember, that was the one thing when Abraham passed the test, God assured everything else God promised him, and he added this one detail, this one more thing. It's about controlling the cities, those that hate them, and your seed referring to the Messiah. This great blessing's going to come upon her because, again, she had that submissive spirit And she didn't have to wait. She didn't have to go through all this junk like Sarah did and finally get there. Some people, that's what it takes. Some people will never get there. And some people get there from youth. And she's one of those. And off she goes. Sure, she's probably she's probably ready to get married. But she can't say this. And again, maybe she was looking for a God-fearer, and it's so real, and that was enough for her. But just knowing it's the will of God is sufficient. And off she goes. She's out to fulfill the will of God immediately. That's what all of us need. Immediate obedience to God. I mean, she had all night to think about it. Just like Abraham had all night. Just like Messiah had that time in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he said, not my will be done, but your will. And so that's the thing. Submission doesn't mean submission's not real submission when it's only comfortable. The test of submission comes when it's uncomfortable. And no one has ever had a greater test of that than Messiah. The crucifixion, he had the power to cancel the whole thing. If he asked us forward, cancel the whole thing. But at the end, what do they say? Not my will, but your will be done. But often Christians, whether they meet on the Sabbath or some other day, the reality is when the test comes and God asks them to do something hard, something painful, perhaps even, maybe even cost their life, to lay down their life like Messiah did. Their answer in reality is, not your will, but my will be done. And that is the root, and that is the root of a rebellious heart, a heart that hasn't had all the rebellion driven out of it yet. But Rebecca does not have a rebellious heart. She has a submissive heart, and a heart that's compassionate, and so on and so forth, and a heart that's sold out to doing the will of God. Now we continue on, and we're going to continue on and looking, and we continue on Genesis 24 and verses 62 through 67. And Isaac came from the way of the well of Lahairoi, for he dwelt in the south country. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at eventide. And he lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and she saw Isaac, and lighted off the camel. For she said unto the servant, what man is it that walks in the field to meet us? And the servant says, my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay. Now it's not so much about the heart of the woman, Rebekah, it's about the heart of Isaac. And first of all, where he's located, Lahairoi, remember, is also the same as Beersheba. Okay, he's dwelling in the south country, okay, towards the southern end of the land of Canaan that's promised, okay, the southern part of that. And it's deserty, except, and he's meditating. He's got his mind on God. He's thinking about the good. So when you see meditating, it means literally to roll something over and over your mind. And we can't know what was in his mind, but it's certain his mother was part of it. I mean, he has not gotten. He only had room for one woman in his life, his mother, and now she's gone. And he's been mourning and perhaps going, God, why? I mean, she's 127. He's only 37. But Dad's going to live a lot longer. And more than common, women live a little longer than men, just like today. Perhaps to him, it seemed a little, she went a little early. But it was to get the seed going. He needed a wife to make that happen. And Isaac didn't have room for two women. So his mother had to be taken out of the way. But notice how he's still setting his mother's tent up. Now, there's some interesting things right there. Notice how Sarah's tent, men and women, maybe poor people, generally did not share the same tent. When a man, when a man wanted to spend time with his wife in bed, she prepared her tent and invited him to her tent. And otherwise, he slept in his own tent. Yeah, he kind of had his man cave thing going on in his tent, and she had her woman, I guess you call it cave, I don't know what you call it, her woman place of solitude and refuge and peace in her tent, And now his mother's been dead for a while, as I mentioned. This is, this whole process took 8 months at least, okay? And all this time, since his mother's died, he's been setting up her tent. He's not let his mama go. But now he's learned the will of his father, because when his servant told him that he married this woman, Rebecca. And notice Rebecca has covered herself. 2 things about that. She put that veil on. One, she is now showing her submission to Isaac. Remember, Sarah didn't put on the veil until she finally got humiliated. She had that crushing. And remember, and there's a prophetic parallel. There's a parallel there, and I'm going to go into it briefly about this crushing Sarah had to go through in Abraham. Because crushing is what the word tribulation literally means. And a rebellious heart, to be transformed into a submissive heart, has to be crushed. The person, if they will not accept the submission, it'll have to be often, if it's crushed, after it has to be crushed first, then it'll be submitted. Humiliation, public humiliation. Humiliation brings humility, like we saw did with Abraham and Sarah. But it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. And there's a prophetic aspect to this. This is why there has to be a tribulation. The world is rejecting God, and gets to the point where you have a bunch of lukewarm, half-committed believers who basically are just wrapped up in this world, consumed with the things Jesus told us to not be wrapped up in eating and drinking, just the everyday affairs of life, but to be about the Father's business, watching and praying and carrying out the Great Commission. And really, it's a rebellious heart. They know what the Great Commission is, but they're just not focused on carrying it out. And when the crushing comes, you see a change. But Israel has a rebellious heart. When the crushing comes, as we saw in the restoration of Israel, and we saw about how it all accumulates in that day of wrath. And that's the final crushing, that final pressing of the olive oil, of the olive to make oil, Gethsemane, the place of pressing, where the olives were crushed. Israel is going to be crushed in the tribulation, and especially crushed in that final press during the day of wrath. And how they respond? They loathe themselves in their own eyes. They hate what they've become. They see they've had a rebellious heart against God. And they repent, and they come into submission to Messiah, the one whom they had crushed and pierced. Has now crushed them. That cornerstone that they rejected crushes everyone it lands on. And the crushing is to bring them to place submission so the blessing can come upon them that we talked about in the restoration of Israel. And then on the Gentiles. And you see that pattern repeated finally on the whole world. When that final rebellion, when Satan is let loose for a short time, and all the rebels expose themselves and they're destroyed, and then the world can be made new again, wherein dwells only righteousness. But the crushing had to come first. But you don't have to be crushed. That's the difference between barley and wheat. Barley when barley, most time if you get a windling fork, you throw it in the air, the wind blows it, and it'll separate the chaff for you for the most part. It doesn't take much effort, much crushing. But wheat, you have to be run over with a thing called a tribulene back in the day, where the word tribulation comes from, to crush the wheat. And then then you throw it up and the wind blows the chaff off, and it may take multiple applications to get all the chaff, that hard, unedible husk off the outside of wheat, because wheat's got a much harder husk. But those who are like the barley are going to go in the first round. And Rebecca here is like the barley. She's been nothing but submissive. She doesn't have to be crushed the way, humiliated, to bring her into a place of humility like Abraham and Sarah had been. So she covers herself and immediately says, I'm married, unavailable, but there's something else with this being covered. For this veil covers her face. Isaac has to marry her also, sight unseen. And like in the friendship covenant we talked about, where one man has to do what the other one, where one friend has to do what the other, if one friend asks someone to do something and they do it, then they have to be willing. If they ask, the first friend has to be willing to do it too. She had agreed to marry him sight unseen. Now it's about testing his character. Will he marry her sight unseen? He doesn't know what she looks like. She knows about her character. No, she's a God-fearer. No, she's family-oriented. Been raised right. No, she's compassionate to strangers, etc. But he does not know what she looks like. And why? Because that's the least important thing about picking someone to marry. The Proverbs 31 woman says nothing about her looks, her appearance, because everything about her is under her control, because what the world values is just not that valuable. In fact, what's it say about beauty? It's vain. And charm is deceitful. But a woman who fears the Lord, who truly fears the Lord, who submits to the Lord, not got that bit of rebellion left in them, she is truly valuable. But she wants to know if Isaac hears a Proverbs 31 man. I've talked about that before. Look at the characteristics of her husband and notice those things. There's men all want, I want a Proverbs 31 woman, but they don't want to be a Proverbs 31 man. It has to be two ways, just like that friendship covenant. And Isaac knows his father wants him to marry her, and he is submissive to his father. And notice, she puts her going into Sarah's tent. He's been setting that thing up, and we'll look at exactly how long in a few minutes. He's been setting that thing up all this time, empty. By going into her tent, Rebecca is taking the place of his mother in his life. Now, Mama's not the only woman in his life, Rebecca is. And becomes his wife. And notice he loves her. And notice how he loved her. And you may think, well, of course he loved her, his wife. No, the Bible talks all the time about the unloved wife, okay? Sometimes what's love got to do with it? People get married for different reasons, political reasons, whatever, Sure, they go along, they fulfill their duties as husband and wife to each other, have children, etc. But they don't necessarily love each other. But he loves her. And he's comforted after his mother's death. His dad arranged this mail-order bride because Isaac has been moping over his mother all this time, and he's had no interest in a wife. He hadn't asked dad for one. The servant had to tell him what was done. He didn't even know that Abraham had sent off for a wife to get him a wife. His father. But response is immediate obedience, immediate submission. He also has a submissive heart, and now he's blessed and comforted. Mama is no longer number one and missing. He has a new number one. Now we're gonna look at Abraham now and kind of wrap up with Abraham like we did with Sarah earlier. And now look, we're going to start in Genesis 25, 1-6. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimram, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, Shaul. And Yokshan begat Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Dedan were Asherim and Letashim and Leamim. Laiman. There we go. Laiman. The sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanak, and that's really Hanak, and Ibadah and Eldah. And these are the children of the Keturah. And Abraham gave all he had unto Isaac. But unto the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had, he gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. Okay, now let's take a look at this. First of all, Abraham took a wife. After what? He got Isaac a wife. He took care of his son first. He wants to make sure that seed that God promised has, that is now taken care of. And now he's going to take care of his own loneliness. Now, notice this, he takes his wife, Keturah, and this was not about sex. Notice he already had concubines. Okay. But a wife is not the same as a concubine. And he's got this a different type of relationship. And I'm going to explain what a concubine is today. Then I'll explain what the difference between that and a wife is. Because in America, people think of a concubine. I mean, what do they think of a concubine? Often they think of, well, maybe a mistress. And the children, and any children they have are illegitimate. Or they think, or perhaps they think of a sex slave. Someone that bought in sex trafficking, whatever it be, the slave take care of their sexual desires, whatever. Or something like that, or maybe a palakis. Like in Greece, when a woman goes in, when I lived in Greece, my landlady did this. Actually did this. When she went into menopause, she had her best friend take on her wifely duties to take care of her husband's sexual needs while she went through menopause. It's called a palakis. And this woman was her best friend, and she ate dinner after all that was over, she's still over there eating dinner with us and everything. Okay. Well, this is not it's not any of those types of relationships. The word concubine, the Arabic word, means half-wife. I'll explain why in a minute. The Chinese word means accepted one because their children are not counted as illegitimate. So there is a marriage here, but it's not the same as a marriage with a wife. So you might be thinking, what's the difference? Well, the difference is this. A marriage, remember how we talked about the family and all this, and how and how Bethuel was from the wife of Nahor, not one of his concubines? A marriage is between not just a man and a woman, but between two families. In America, we sell those expressions: son-in-law, brother-in-law, etc. And brother used to have legal. So being someone's brother carried with it legal responsibilities. And when one family was joined to another by marriage, those responsibilities were also became the other family's responsibility as well. And that could, in America, that used to mean, from Britain, and they did this, and the American got that from Britain. That meant like, if a man couldn't pay his debt, they could go after his brothers, and they couldn't go, and that would include his brother-in-laws. Okay, these kind of things. It's in law. As far as the law was concerned, you were as good as if you were their biological brother. Okay, their biological. You had to take responsibility, and it's about. And a concubine is just a marriage between two people, a man and the woman. not joining two families together, just joining two people together in marriage. And concubines typically were orphans, slaves, or women who perhaps were bereaved of their families for various reasons. Perhaps so their whole family had been, they were grown, they weren't an orphan in that sense, perhaps, but then their family got killed or taken captive somewhere and kidnapped, and they're in a terrible mess because there's no Social Security back then. A woman's security for when she gets old really has two options. One, become a slave and hope the master takes care of her when she gets old, doesn't abandon her, which would happen sometimes. They just abandon their old slaves and let them starve or whatever. Okay. Can't get enough work out of them. Wasn't unheard of. Or the other one was get married to someone as their concubine, because she has no family to join to him. But that will give her children, and the children will take care of her in her old age, not to mention her husband. Yes, the man is still called a husband, whether who he's married to is a wife, where two families joined together, a concubine, which is him and her. So when Abraham did this, remember, Abraham's righteous. He's not like Lamech. Lamech takes two wives totally out of lust. For Abraham, this is an act of love. He's given these wives, these women who are in this kind of very bad situation, hope in the future. They're going to have sons. And notice, he sends, when those sons get older, older, and perhaps their mothers went with them to be taken care of by their sons, or perhaps they stayed with Abraham, be taking care of him. But either way, their sons, he gave them money. It wasn't like when Ishmael went out, okay? But they can't be in the land of the promise. And the reason is, again, because that's about the seed, the promised seed, Messiah. And there can't be any blurring about who the lineage is. So he's got to separate them out. The east country, east of what? Canaan, still inside the boundaries of the promised land. And we're not going to go over all of them, but there's a couple that are worth mentioning here in particular. One is Midian. We'll talk more about him in a minute. The other one's Hanok. Notice, this is the same as Enoch. We talked about before, it means dedication. And it shows that among Midian's son, dedicated to God. Dedication to God, like Hanukkah, is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is like actually Hanukkah. Okay, right? All right, so it's the same thing, dedication. And in this case, remember, Abraham is certain, remember, all of his males of his household, whether his seed or not, and these are his seed, have to be circumcised. Midian's been circumcised. And his son indicates he carries on the dedication to God, this Midian the man does himself. And that brings us something very important here. Oh, so it says he gave all to Isaac, it's referencing particularly, he just gave them a bunch of money and stuff. It's talking about the promised land, the right to live in the land of Canaan. Again, because that has to do with the seed of Abraham, Messiah. Again, can be no confusion about who that is, who he comes from. That's why the separation has to occur. Now, in Exodus 2, verses 15 through 16, we read the following. Now, when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled with the troughs of water of their father's flock. Now, this priest's name's Ruel, also Jethro. 2 names again, non-common. But notice he's a priest of Midian. And we know from other passages about Reuel, even there's a reference to God there in his name, notice. Jethro he's a priest of the Most High God, even though he's not part of the people of Israel. Just like a Gentile. So in that regard, you might consider him a Gentile, even though perhaps he's circumcised himself. But in that regard, he's not part of the people of Israel, just like Melchizedek was a Gentile, wasn't circumcised. That started with Abraham, but he's in that order. He's in this other priest order, but he's still a priest of God. And faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And if you remember, Moses, although he had these parents, they only had him for a few months, and he was raised among the Egyptians. And there's evidence that, at one point he worshipped the Egyptian gods. He didn't know anything else, or perhaps he had heard about God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but perhaps a little bit of mixture. He doesn't know how to worship God right. Well, how's he going to learn this? He learns this from this priest of Midian. And Midian is a descendant of Abraham through Keturah. So, God is playing ahead, because there's lots. Most of what's said about Midian's in the book of Judges, and they're fighting with the Israelites, and raiding them and those kind of things. And then prophetically, there's not a lot said about them, just that they're going to give tribute to when Messiah's ruling the earth, like everyone else. But the most important thing about them is right here. It's the most important of these descendants of here. And I want to mention here, by the way, notice there's 8 descendants here. And earlier, we saw his brother had 12, like the 12 tribes of Israel. So there's 8 here. So, now we've got Ishmael, Isaac, and these 8 makes 10, plus the unnamed sons. And but the reason these are named, I'll talk about that in a moment here, because I'm going to bring up something else very important here. In 1 Chronicles 1, 32 through 33. Now the sons of Keturah, Abraham's concubine, she bears Zimram and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. And the sons of Jokshan, Sheba and Dedan. The sons of Midian, Ephah, Chenak, Abadah, and Eldaah. And these are the sons of Keturah. And of course, notice the reference to God in Eldaah's name as well. Okay. Just another little food for thought there. But notice now, she's called his concubine here. Earlier, she's called his wife. So, how could it? And notice when he took this wife, he had to fulfill the sexual responsibility to her. Remember, before Isaac, it was said his body was as good as dead. He wasn't able to have children with anyone. I mean, when God fixes you, he really fixes you. When he heals you, he really heals you. Okay. But so how could she go from concubine to wife? Because she got, as it were, a promotion that came with a responsibility. Often when a man had concubines and a wife, again, if he's doing it for the right purposes, the right heart, like Abraham, he's doing it as an act of love. There's this work of the women they do, like drawing the wire we saw earlier. And the wife's responsible for dividing that work up and keeping them all organized, and the women doing all the work they do, and so on and so forth. She's over them. Well, since Sarah left, Abraham's been having to, put someone in charge temporarily and, having to do all this. Well, she's taking that off of Abraham's shoulders, for one thing. But the bigger thing is, remember, the concubine's only a marriage between a man and a woman, and is not any concerned about the in-laws at all. Okay. It's not two families joined together. So, and sadly, this is what a lot of people in America, a lot of believers in America have today. They have a concubine, not a wife. They're like, well, I didn't marry my wife's family. Or the woman will be like, I didn't marry my husband's family. If that's you, you are not a wife. You do not have a wife. If you in that relationship, you have a concubine. So she started out as concubine, but now she's responsible and caring for Abraham's family, which is Isaac in this case. And Rebecca, perhaps she's going to have to teach Rebecca the things Sarah would have taught Rebecca, because Rebecca's from a far country. Isaac used to get things, a certain way. And Isaac may not have a clue. He loves the way his mama cooks this or that, but he don't have a clue how mama actually did it. But Keturah does. And Keturah's now her scope and her responsibility in her heart has been expanded to not just her children in Abraham, but Abraham's family as well. So if if you're in a relationship where you're married, but it's been reduced to that of a concubine, this is how you expand that relationship and make it better. And make it as God intended. The only scenario where God really intended concubines is where two people who didn't have anyone else, no family, married each other. Or at least one of them didn't have any family. But if two don't, of course, you're never going to be able to expand that. But she is now concerned about more than just her and her own children. And like I said, the other ones may have left, like Hagar did with her sons, but she's not going to. She's with Abraham till death do us part. And if they did that, they were free, if they've been slaves before, like I'd mentioned with Hagar before, okay? Because Abraham's doing what God's law says, even though it hadn't been written down yet. He's following all God's commandments, as God's commandment says. If you free a former, if you're interested in a slave woman, you have to marry, and if you put her out, you can't return her being a slave. But she is not even she is in a position for life. Okay. No, when her children leave, she's not going with them. Again, this was never about sex. He's already having sex. It wasn't about lust. It was about love. Because Abraham is righteous. Now, we continue on with Genesis 25, verses 5 through 7:11. Now, these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 115 years. And Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, which is before Mamre. In the field which Abraham purchased the sons of Heth, there was Abraham buried and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well, Lahairoi. Okay. So Isaac, really likes the southern area, obviously. So he's had to go up to I just spaced it. Hebron. He's had to go up to Hebron. Okay. He's had to go up to Hebron, but it's not really that far away. And the day maybe so north. And now he's coming back. He's still hanging out by this well. Okay. He just likes this area. And notice again, Zohar the Hittite. Okay. And Mamre, remember, Mamre was an Amorite. Okay. So, and Abraham's been friends with both of these. But notice that his sons marry. Now, notice Ishmael is still called his son. Now, not the other sons. Ishmael is a kind of a different class than these ones at Keturah. And perhaps it's because him and Isaac grew up somewhat together. But notice that they are acting as brothers again. And this is important. Brothers can get together for reunions and not necessarily have to live next to each other. Remember, Ishmael was very happy, as we saw. Really, the Paran, where he got to go hunting, really suited him well. Isaac, he's a homebody, obviously. He doesn't like that kind of life. He doesn't want it in there, and there's nothing wrong with either one of them. They're not one a good man, one a bad man. They're just different men, and they can still live together as brothers. So, and that's what happens here when Abraham dies. Now, notice his age. He's 175 years old, which means he's 2,187 and 83 years. 83 years after Adam was formed out of the dust. And one in Eber, his like triple great grandfather, is going to outlive him by 4 more years. He's not going to die to 2187 years after Adam was formed out of the dust. But that's it. So, in 4 more years, there's Isaac is going to be it. Okay. All right. There's not going to be this more overlap. But notice this. So notice his age again. Another important aspect is after Sarah dies, Abraham lives on for another 48 years. Another 38 years. I'm sorry, another 38 years. He was 137. She was 127. He's 10 years older than her. So another 38 years. Okay. Another 38 years. So he's going to see, he's going to be able to watch what happens with Isaac and Rebekah, this wife he got her, the bride of Isaac. Now, we're going to wrap up with this other son of Abraham. Again, he's important in the Bible. He's not some unknown son. The Bible actually spends, as we've seen, a fair amount of space on this on Ishmael. Now let's start and let's look what it has to say as it wraps up with him here in Genesis 25 verses 12 through 15. Now these are the sons of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Abraham's handmaiden, bare unto Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to the generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoh and Kedar, and Abdel, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Masah. Kedar, Tema, Zeter, Nephish, and Kedemah. Now again, I took this in the sense of went a little more detail about these sons of Ishmael along with the sons of Keturah, of Abraham through Keturah, but we don't want to lose focus of our main thing here. Some of these will play out to be important, and perhaps we'll talk about that when it happens and remind you that they're Ishmael's sons. But Ishmael has all these sons as well through an Egyptian. Remember, Hagar is an Egyptian, as mentioned, but he's still a son of Abraham. And notice he's legitimate. And notice the stress of Abraham's son is here. And this tells us something. You better not, if you curse remember the promise to all of Abraham's seed, not just the seed of Abraham, Messiah, but all of his seed, whether you're grafted in through faith or natural born. In Israel, in Abraham, as we showed before, Ishmael is called Abraham's seed more than once. And if you curse him, you're going to be cursed. If you bless him, you want to be blessed. So be careful how you treat the Arabs. They're not some sort of second-class, forgotten, miswanted children, descendants of Abraham. The blessing, that rule about blessing and cursing is still applies to them as well. That Ishmael never stopped being Abraham's son. Now, we wrap up here in Genesis 25, verses 16 through 20. Now, these are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles, 12 princes according to their nations. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died and was gathered to his people. And they dwelt in Havilah unto Shur, which is before Egypt, as you go towards Assyria, and he died in the presence of all his brethren. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. The daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padan Aram, and the sister to Laban the Syrian. Okay, well, we'll talk about why he's called a Syrian. They're referred to as a Syrian a little bit later, but it goes back to that genealogy. Remember, they came through Aram, Armenia today. Syria is also are also called that. Syrians are called that, and that's why this reference to Syria, even though they're not living. Remember, they're living in Mesopotamia. They're not of a different ethnic group. And there's a bunch of mixed ethnic groups there, just like the U.S. today. But that's for their particular ethnic group. And he's going to move, and he's going to move, and they're going to move some. And we'll talk about that when we go back to Laban later. But notice let's wrap up. It wraps us up here with Ishmael. He's 137 years old. Didn't live as old as Abraham did. He lived as old as Abraham did to the point where Sarah died. Now remember, he was born when Abraham was 84 years of age, 86 years of age. Okay. He was 14 when Isaac was he was 14 years older than Isaac. Okay. He was born when Abraham was 86. So 86, let's see, 100, that's 120, that's 123 years minus Abraham's 175. All right, sorry, 223 years. So he lives 48 years. That's where I got 40 years. He lives 48 years after Abraham's death. Okay. But notice this expression. He died and was gathered into his people. Remember that same expression we just saw about Abraham. It indicates something to us. Ishmael, at this point, was a believer, was a follower of God. Okay. He's a son, but the problem is his sons are not going to be. Because remember, we talked about the mother, the influence of the mother. Remember, his son's mother came from Egypt, and they started mixing, as we talked before, of his descendants, these worship of God with the worship from idolatry, and then later from other places in the Middle East. That's prevalent. It can be seen in Islam today. But Ishmael himself was a worshiper of God, as he learned from his father. And notice, he died in the presence of all his brethren. Who? Those other children of Keturah and the other concubines that Abraham sent east. Ishmael had went east. Paddan Haran is east. There's peace between all the sons of Abraham. I mean, the day people talk about the Abraham Accords. Well, this is the original one. And what brought about this peace? The death of Abraham, just like the death of Messiah, has brought about peace between Jew and Gentile, has destroyed that wall of separation because he died for the sins of both. And finally, we're going to look at this thing here about Isaac. He's 40 years old. Think about that. For 3 years, he was mourning his mama, setting up her tent. Nobody's in it. Every time he goes somewhere, he's having that thing set up for nobody to be in. I mean, we saw before Ishmael was a pathetic mama's boy, and he's laying under a bush crying. He's 19 years old, when he should have been out there looking for water for his mother, and how how the wimp was turned to a warrior in the wilderness. Well, Isaac's is still a wimp here. I mean, he's been for 30. He's also pathetic mama's boy for 3 years. He never thought, look for a wife. He couldn't imagine someone replacing mom in his life. But fortunately, his dad was looking out for him, and he had the humility to submit to his dad, and he got the blessing that came with that, which is Rebecca. So, but he's 40 years. So Abraham, we can see Abraham's going to live 35 years after Isaac marries Rebecca. So he's going to be in the background for a little while when we continue next week. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.